You're listening to the First Fight podcast, home of the people and stories behind the fight. I'm Jennifer Anderson, the host and creator. My goal is to give you a peek into the remarkable world of fighting and create a platform for fighters to tell their stories. In each episode of this series, a different fighter shares a transformative story of their first time. Welcome back to the First Fight series. I know we've been on a little hiatus, but we're back in 2021 with some new episodes and interviews, and actually we're going to start adding some new special episodes with people who are in the industry, not necessarily fighters, and we're going to get their perspective on things and hear some interesting stories as well. So today we're going to kick off one of these special episodes with Steve Rivera. Steve is the owner and coach at Elite Wrestling, and he is also a longtime friend and wrestling coach of Frankie Edgar. Now, we've all heard Frankie's first fight story, and Steve was actually there, and we're going to get his perspective on Frankie's first fight and just hear some of his ideas about the industry and thoughts on Frankie as a person and a fighter as well. So this is actually one of my favorite episodes so far. Steve is a very passionate guy and has a really interesting perspective on things, so I hope you enjoy. Steve Rivera, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it. You want to just introduce yourself? Tell me how you and Frankie met.
Sure. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me today too. Steve Rivera. I'm the owner of Elite Wrestling, and my existence with Frankie Edgar started a long time ago. At this point, we're almost at he was 13, and I think he's almost 40 now. So we're shooting over 20 years, easy. But we ran into each other at the Toms River Wrestling Club. I was at that time the coach of the Toms River Wrestling Club, and Frankie was in 7th grade, starting his wrestling journey. And I met him there, and I was a coach of that team for 7 years, so we had quite a time together. And in that time, our friendship developed into what it is today, a brothership, I would say. And moving from there, obviously, I was teaching him wrestling, trying to help him, guide him. He was a crazy high school kid. His mom was doing her best as a divorcee and recently married with Frank, but doing her best to raise this wild child. And me coming into his life, it was 7th, 8th grade. The first couple of years were real simple and nothing that I even remember. But then once high school hit, man, Frankie Edgar came alive. and from there on, the journey's been nothing but epic. We go through the high school career. He does a great job. He wins a lot of matches. District, region titles. Obviously, our goal is state title. He comes up short. He takes a 2nd and a 5th. Those I want to tell you, those 2nd and 5ths were probably the fire that we still see today. From there, he went on to college. He did a great job there. At the same time, started developing into the man we know today. In college, he was a 4-time NCAA qualifier, PSAC champ 3 times or so. And, college career ends. He feels like he's not completed. I'm now running Elite Wrestling for years at that point by the time he comes back. But he comes back and says, I want to get into the fighting game. I'm like, all right. And with us, we don't just dive into things, you know what I mean? We got to make sure we're doing things right. So I'm friends with Billy Scott. I've known him my whole life, wrestlers in town. Billy owns an MMA jiu-jitsu place. So I call Billy up and say, hey, man, we're going to get into this. Can we come over there? You know what I mean? He's like, sure, come on over. So we come over there and all that. And Frankie starts his journey. From there, he works his way to Ricardo, I guess. And, we start working on coaches. At the same time, we get Mark. And all these things are the future of what you guys see today, but let's precede that. We know nothing about fighting. We know nothing about anything other than, there's a smoker fight in New York. You want to give it a go? And Frankie's been fighting at Rhino at this point, which is a Rhino fight team. It's not anything that's around today, but he's just getting in there. He meets Chris Ligori and some of the guys, and first opportunity gets thrown out, and Frankie's like, hell yeah, let's do this. So he trains, obviously, and this is before we even, MMA's kind of new, and all that stuff, so he doesn't really, I want to say he's just a street fighter, man. He's just a wrestler that's a street fighter at the time, with many rounds done in Seaside Heights beating up North Jersey kids.
I said he's lucky he found this career, because
yeah, no, there's no doubt.
Perfect fit.
It was a perfect fit, and that's what I tell people. Some people are born fighters. Frankie Edgar was born a fighter. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So with that, like I was saying before, I remember a lot of things about that day, but some is like the quiet journey in the car to the Bronx. I remember being on that highway on the back of Manhattan coming around, and it's starting to get rougher and rougher as far as the outside environment, and them telling us we're getting closer to our fight site. And I'm like, man, where the hell are we going to fight? And, I'm not accustomed to the fight game at this point. I mean, Frankie's really the first guy that really brought me into the way this kind of stuff goes. So we drive into the Bronx, and, it's not a pretty part of town at all. And we just pull over, and you literally see an awning outside this building, and it's spray painted, and it's Jerome's gym or Jethro's gym, and you're like, Frankie's like, there it is, and I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, in there. So we walk in this place. Now, you walk in, and it's sizable. It's not like a little place. It had 2 big rings in it, and then bleachers on the side, and then a center area where people were getting their hands taped. So everything was out in front and stuff. And I'm just amazed at first that this is allowed, and obviously it wasn't, but the fact that it's going down, and I'm like, wow, this is just amazing. And we went up there with a posse. Frankie always has, his group of friends that support him. So I mean, there's a huge group of us up there, including his pop, Frank. And man, we go in this thing, and the fights are settling. You're seeing how they're matchmaking. There's matchmaking going on in the audience that day. There's people walking in saying, I'll fight. And this guy's like, oh, this guy didn't make weight. I'll fight him. And you're like, what? All right, cool. This is going to be crazy. People walking in with 12-packs, sitting down in the bleachers, blood stains all over the canvases, never washed. Walls, all just what you would think when someone calls a smoker fight. It was everything that now that I know, 20 years in the gig, you're just like, man, that was, Frankie lived the perfect situation there, because it was textbook smoker fight. All right? So now, we get into this, let's get into the fight, a couple of things that come to mind. One is to just show you the fight environment there. You had guys that were coming out, and you show gloves, and most guys touch gloves, and then you start to fight. Well, in this card, there was a gentleman that went out there and put his glove to hit the other guy's glove, and the other guy chose not to hit his glove, but to punch him in the face, and clearly knocks him out cold right there, and says, hey, there's no rule saying I had to touch his glove. And then that's how we knew we were going to have a hell of a day. And sure enough, they have the fight. So let's set the environment a little. You got the bleachers on the side. You have a ring, a boxing ring that's close to the wall, but you can't touch the wall, but it's right behind it. And then there's another one right in front of it, which all of us, we jump on. So we're on the other ring, looking into the ring right next to it, leaning off the ropes and shit. And you have all the people around it, and let's start this. And Frankie gets out there, and this kid Eric was a to-do guy at the time, man. We had heard of him. He was known for doing these undergrounds. He was I don't even think he had losses at this point, And Frankie's like, yeah, I got this. He goes out there, and sure enough, he thinks it's going to be a normal little professional fight, and this dude comes out and just knees him in the face, off of a clinch. And you see Frankie just light up, oh, wow, this is how it's going. And man, no problem. Between the headbutts and the takedowns and the elbows, and we're just hanging over his dad. We're holding each other back. It was just sheer mayhem for that 2 rounds of just craziness. And I want to say, like, that was the day that I, as a friend of Frankie Edgar's, could say he arrived. Because that day when he got hit in the face, you could see, and now that I know what I know, you watch guys get hit in the face and you could see them question if this is what they want to do. There was no doubt in Frankie Edgar's face when he took that knee that this is what he wanted to do, and he wanted you to pay for that knee, and he was going to show you how he was going to do that, which was just a blessing in my part to watch that of him. So then the fight goes on, you know, he wins he beats Eric and all that, and we watch the rest of the card, you know, they pick up some beers, you're allowed to sit and drink in there, we're sitting on the bloody canvas, just watching, talking, and, you know, we go eat afterwards, Frankie, myself, and we're meeting the other people there, and there's several of us in the car, like I said, driving up. And we're going, and he's, you know, touching his face and nothing. How you feeling? I'm all right. You know, my face just sounds, I don't know. All right, so then we get in this restaurant, and we go to the bathroom. And Frankie's like, my nose, man, check this out, right? And he grabs his nose, and he blows it. And as he literally blows it right in front of my face, he just pushes out. I watch his eyelid grow. And he had no facial swelling. He was fine. And when he did that, all of a sudden, this bubble on his eye, like his eye drooped. It got blown up, and then it got heavy and fell over his eye. I'm like, holy, and him too. We're both in the mirror, and we're both like, holy shit! Like, what the hell's going on here? And we've never been in fight games. We don't know about facial broken bones and how it happens. So now he blew enough where his eye blew up, and he has an air pocket sitting like right above his eye, but on his side of his head. I know this sounds crazy, folks, but this is how it was. He has this bubble there, and you literally see it on his skull. But now we have to go sit down. He has a crew cut, so you can kind of see it. And his mom's there and shit, and we're going to sit down. So he starts pushing his forehead and that air bubble back down behind his freaking ear. So he's pushing it, trying to streamline it. And I'm like inside, like, oh my God, what is going on here? Like, I've never seen this or nothing. We're Googling stuff. We're doing Google's doctor stuff. And sure enough, Mrs. Ponerero is one of our women, of a parent of one of the guys that trains with us. And we, in the trauma of all this, some guys are taking Google guesses and some guys are doing this, that. And Debbie's like, I think he broke his facial bone and the air leaked out. He should be all right. Like, because we're wondering if we should go to dinner and stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? And sure enough, that was the case where he broke his cheekbone and the air that came out here to his eye, he was just pressing in like a subsurface of our skin, which the doctor couldn't get the air out. He literally had to wait days, more like a week, for it to just seep through his pores and empty out. So to tell you that was a traumatic moment in our fight career to start it is an understatement. I was beside myself, I'll be honest. When I saw that happen, I had never seen something like that before. But I could also tell you ever since then, whenever like guys fight and stuff, we know not to tell them to blow their nose and stuff. We learned that lesson. But wow, what an experience of that. That was like one of the most amazing fight experiences I've had in our existence to this day, to be honest with you. One other one which I'll share that Frankie probably doesn't know, or he does know because it was his face, but one of his stitches, one of his fights, he got a real bad tear, and the doctor was from the UFC, really cool guy, and he let me stay with my camera and film everything. And, like, you watch Frankie, like I said, I just watched him get his face broken, and he doesn't even flinch to that. But a lot of people don't realize the damage these guys take in a fight. When they come to the press conference, they're all sewn up and shit, and you guys don't see what it really takes. Frankie Edgar in this fight, this dude has crazy cuts. This doctor lets me feel like the needles that this dude was eating that day. are just the craziest stuff I've ever seen. And him not flinching as this doctor's stabbing him. And then as the doctor's pulling his skin down, and he's more pissed that we lost or tied that fight. He was traumatized by that part. I think the guy could have cut his head off and sewn it back on, and he wouldn't have had an issue with it. But I put it on YouTube. It's on there. So if you guys ever go look, you could go put it there. The music got taken off. I used the Tool song, which was awesome with it, but it didn't last long because of licensing. But it's on there, and it's got like hundreds of thousands of hits. And you'll see what I'm talking about with Frankie and what we're dealing with toughness. So, yeah, I thank you, Frankie Edgar, for your toughness. You've taught me much.
So leading into that first fight, were you nervous for him?
Like we were more excited. It was more of an excitement back then because you didn't know. You didn't know what could really go wrong. You know what I mean? So I would say in the beginning, when he was into the beginning, it was always excitement. You know, I would say it even to this day for me, when I show up in Fight Island, it's still about excitement for him because there's enough people that have to worry. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. How, being a wrestling coach, how did you adjust your approach for MMA?
It's real funny you say that because honestly, I don't think I had to adjust anything. Frankie's first thing he wanted to prove that he wasn't a wrestler, right? So when he got to the fight game, he was instantly wanting to be the boxer. Mm-hmm. So he instantly kind of shunned the wrestling because he always wrestles. So that's what we do, you know. He always wrestles, but he spent so much time boxing and pushing for that kind of just dictate the type of fighter we were going to be, and I didn't want to. He changed the fight game in boxing, if you remember. A lot of people won't remember this, but I've been around long enough to know before Sean Shirk, at that weight class, boxing was a forward and backwards type of event. Mm-hmm. When Frankie Edgar came in, we were coming forward, we were going backwards, we were going side to side. We were beebing, we were bobbing, all right? And with that, first he dismantled Sean, and then from there we watched the progression of his hands. But then we saw the fight game catch up to the hands, and then wrestling's the separation again, right? Mm-hmm. So it was all those things. I feel like Frankie pushed the envelope of boxing, and then everybody chased that, and then it forced him to get back to wrestling, And I want to say today, I am more involved in the wrestling than I probably was in the first whatever. Not that I wasn't there or that we weren't there, but we were developing his boxing and his jiu-jitsu. And now today you see the combination of all of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And me knowing that it took all of those, we had so many hours wrestling already and reps of wrestling already that it was really transitioning from being able to throw punches that Mark's teaching them to those attacks. Yeah. And that was where we were spending our wrestling time with Espo, myself, and other wrestling guys that could help us take Mark's transitions from his punching to his attacks. And Mark being amazing at it as well.
Yeah. So what do you feel Frankie needs from you, like as an athlete in a coach relationship?
I can tell you, honestly, in our relationship, it's so much not about wrestling. You know what I mean? And I was just...
that's why I asked that.
Yeah, it's not. I would say my biggest wrestling role in the Edgar's house today is Santino and Francesco, and even Valentina for her jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean? But for Frankie, I tell Renee, especially since the COVID, I feel like a lot more of my responsibility is to be that family figure because everybody else there is family. We're all family. But their priorities should be set a little bit different since they're there to make Frankie's living together. You know what I mean? So, I'd rather them not have to worry about if Frankie ate or this or that and worry that his left 1 than 2 is right. You know what I mean? So I feel like and Renee not being there now puts more to me. And that the biggest thing of it all, which I would say, and I even tell him, isn't that I got to look at Renee, because Renee and we could talk. It's looking at your children. I got to come home and be able to look at Santino and Francesco and Valentina and be able to tell them if anything ever went wrong that I did everything right to make it right. And that will be the decision that I will make based on that love for your family, not your fighting.
And that's an amazing thing to have in a coach and people around you, especially at his point in his career. Absolutely. He's... it's a well-oiled machine by now. You don't need to be jumping and making changes unless it's something, that stands out. But I think your value as being something stable and protective of him, and, making sure, having good people around you is the best thing you can have.
And he's so good at that. He's amazing at having great people around him. It's
And not
It's
just
an
yes
earned
men.
trust that you only get over time with Frankie Edgar. And that's what people don't realize. You know, like, Frankie's a real friendly guy, and he wears his heart on his sleeve and stuff and all that. But he doesn't trust a lot, you know? Like, it's hard to get that in him. And I feel our relationship has that. And that is what I go on. Like, I go on that trust. Like, at night at the hospital, I'm the guy that goes there knowing that I might not be able to go in the hospital with you. I'll make sure you get in there, and then they're going to kick me out. But I know you're going to make sure I get home. Somehow, from inside that hospital, you're going to look out for me just like I looked out for you.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we were over wherever the hell we just were. And sure enough, we couldn't all go to the hospital. The COVID, they had to leave. I get left there at the hotel. I'm locked out of the hospital. He's inside the hospital. And sure enough, he handled something where the UFC came back to get me. You know what I mean? So it's that, me having his back and him having my back for all these years, that, yeah, it's way beyond fighting and wrestling by far.
Oh,
And honestly, in your lifetime, you just, as I get older, it's a blessing to know you have friendships like this in your life, right? Because there's some people that don't have them. And I'm fortunate enough to have one or two or three. You know what I mean?
The thing I love about fighting is you're in the trenches with someone, you know, it progresses your relationship a lot faster than anything, because you're in real life moments that a lot of people don't experience, you know.
And value. So those life moments, they only get 20 minutes, 25 minutes of that value, or 15 minutes of that value, you know. All that work, all that time, all those sacrifices, all that shit they do, all the people shit are doing around them, you know. And then they only get 25 minutes to do it if it's a 5-rounder, or they get 15 minutes to do it, you know. I just feel like there's so much given for those things, and the people around given for those things, and everything that takes to experience those 15 or 25 minutes is, like you say, one of the amazing experience in your life. Especially when they leave it all out there like our guys do.
Yeah, and you know, that's why I do this, because I like telling the stories behind it, and it's more than the 1% that you see on, you know, under the lights. It's those moments backstage after a loss, you know.
Yeah,
like
I'll give you a story that, like, another one that Frankie wasn't there for, but he's in the octagon for.
Yeah.
And this is why my statement before matters now. Because we were at a fight a couple ago that we lost, and I'm sitting on the floor with Renee, and Santino's standing behind us with his arm around me and his arm around Renee, and me and Renee know he lost, but we can't say nothing because Tino's standing there with such pride for his dad, and they go through the card count, and like, me and Renee knew, but he recognizes his dad loses, and he just, like, releases off of me and just falls into his mom. And that's where I just feel like not enough people realize what really goes into these fights. It isn't just Frankie going to the gym or Renee cooking dinner. It's like what the kids see, what his daughter sees, what his friends see, his mom and dad, you know, when he's getting punched in the face like that. I mean, it's those things that why I cherish the moments. It's why I cherish the moments and appreciate the friendships that I've found through this wrestling that have progressed into Frankie's fighting. Some is police work, some is Army guys, some are Marine guys, some are corporate America guys. You know, the friendships that I've been able to develop through these sports. And as you could tell, they're deep in me, man, because I truly care about these guys and what they do and how they do it.
Well, they're lucky to have someone like you around them, because this, you know, being in this business, not a lot of people are looking out for you, you know.
No,
and
they just want your money.
Yeah, and I've been there, like my husband getting knocked out, and I see how it works backstage. Right. They just want you to be good enough to compete more, you know. They don't really care, and that's why I've always been very tough when advocating for him, because they're not always okay with, they just want to fight. They want to say whatever they have to say to fight, you know.
And make you feel like you want to fight.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of guys who leave that octagon that don't want to fight no more. You know? And you hear that all the time. That's why, like, people, these young guys, I wish they would give more value to the older guys in the sense of what they've already accomplished, and don't belittle it like I'm going to kill everyone, because it takes a lot of work to be that person. And no one's telling you you're not going to do that, but respect the guys that have done it and proven that it doesn't happen overnight for most guys, unless you're Conor McGregor or, you know, that special guy. So I hope as that I leave this game that I can share that more with the younger guys, and as they try to belittle my legendary friend Frankie Edgar, you know what I mean? Because he's the old guy, but he's the old guy that's competing with young guys, beating young guys. He's gone through 3 weight classes now, that he'll be fighting for his 3rd weight class title in the next 2 years. And to hear anyone degrade or minimize that fucking career is just ignorance. And I hope to educate people so they can stop thinking these old guys are old, and realize that if they couldn't do it, they wouldn't be in there. Like, it's just not, it's not a sport like that. You don't get to pretend.
He can compete still.
Yeah, and I don't feel like it's just him. There's so many of these guys. There is so many of these guys, you know? It's not just Frankie at all. There's so many of them out there. So, yeah, and as the sport's evolving, you know, you're seeing it. The guys are younger, yeah, but the good guys are still in that 30 age range, you know? So,
well, that's peak, I think.
I agree.
Men, anyways. 31.
32-ish, yeah. And now the freak athletes getting into 35, and the 40 being your new 30s and all that crap, you know? Let's be honest. When Randy Couture was at this age, they were like, oh my God. Now there's like 5 guys there, and they don't say shit about it. You know what I mean?
You know, this reminds me of Glover, how he's doing.
Right.
Like, he's really showing that experience has a lot of value, 100%. And he's utilizing it in areas where he can't be better physically or faster. He can compensate with his experience. So, and
I think Max has given a great example of that. How,
oh my gosh, yeah,
with his comments lately, you know, and everybody always talked about it, but now actually people are publishing it, so that's going to help. Yeah, because people always say, "Well, I've heard it for years that you don't need to spar all the time," you know, and then they hear the world champs coming out, and you know, high level guys like that. That's going to hopefully change some boxing guys. Yeah, I mean, this sport is so young that it's still evolving, and we're still learning how to train properly. And you know, looking back at like Miletich and all those, you know, how they used to do things. And just think of Miletich, like look at how they owed the world. I remember Frankie and Chris flying out there and training with those guys for a week at a time. You know, I remember, like that's what I mean. The sport's come so far, and these guys have gone through those stages. You know what I mean? So. Yeah, and just think of the Miletich Army back in the day. Look at that fight team at the time. I mean, when Frankie was going out there, it was just amazing. Everybody was there, you know? So I just feel like that, and now with Ali being who he is, these guys have access to, like, the best guys in the world, you know what I mean? At any weight class, pretty much. So, I guess to finish up, what would you say is your biggest lesson that you've learned being his coach? There's a lot of lessons that I learned from all these guys, to be honest. Frankie, he's not a lesson teacher through words. He's a lesson teacher through action. So, like, consistency. Frankie Edgar teaches me that consistency. You know, I feel like we're both like that. Not to take anything away from him, but, like, he's always given me this pedestal, like, you're 51, look at you, man, I hope I can do what you do. And I'm thinking, shit, I wish I did what you did when I was your age. But at this point, you know, these values that we grew up in the older day, I feel he grew up with in his house. His parents put me around him early enough. I've been around this kid since he's 13. He's 40 years old now. I'm 52, you know, 52 this year. I mean, we've been together a real long time, and I feel like I try to teach guys, trainers today. We're not here to direct these young men. We're here to guide them. Let them make choices, live and learn off those choices, just like we did. If we're going to direct them and not let them make those choices or wrong choices, then they're not going to learn the lessons that we learned, right? So with Frankie Edgar, I feel like a lot of those lessons are examples that he lives. Loyalty, consistency, hard work, sacrifice, discipline, right? Those would be the 5 lessons that I consider he's a good poster child for that I get to watch consistently. But as a dad, you take those things, and I used to feel like those were my 5 best traits. And now as a dad, I see that like me trying to communicate better would go over sacrifices that I'm willing to make for wrestling, so as I watch this next phase of Frankie Edgar, I'm looking forward to watching those 5 values morph into the next phase of his life, and those examples and lessons he'll teach me there, because Frankie's a rarity, he's a very special athlete. I'm around amazing athletes, and he's definitely a special athlete, and the things he's done so far, not many people can do, which is staying real and be world famous. That alone just is an amazing thing about him. You know what I mean? So going forward, I hope the lessons he shows me is how to be a better husband and a better dad, and all the new ways that the younger generation is going to do that versus the way I do it now. You know what I mean? And I look forward to the rest of our journey together, to be honest with you. The damage and things we always talk about, those stories will be legendary forever in our sit downs, and and there's only so many friendships in your life that you cherish, and his is definitely one of them.
In life in general, but especially in this field, you need that, and that is a priceless thing to have. And I think it contributes to his longevity. If you have good people around you, helping you make good decisions in your career, he's been able to continue on. I see a lot of people crash and burn that have a lot of potential because they don't have good people around them, or yes men around them, people that aren't going to keep them in check. So he's lucky to have you. And
Jersey, right? Yeah, that's one thing you've learned from Wisconsin. In New Jersey, they're going to let you know. You don't want to hear it.
Exactly. But he's definitely a leader on the team, and
right.
This is the type of interview and stories that I love, because it shows the connections that people have behind it all.
And to add to that, and you're a better half, I had the experience to go with Frankie to the Tough, and then my wife was cool enough to actually let me go. So I went there and I slept there for weeks, and to watch the interaction of your Corey and Mark Henry, if we could have
at the beginning,
oh my
that's
God,
interesting.
Yeah, right. So between the interesting of it, but Mark seeing the talent, and then they're the way they just would find each other, and watching that build, and then Frankie just being the team leader that he is, and the way he handled that there, and we're fighting legendary BJ Penn, and the way the class was, we were really classy as teams, It was probably boring to everyone, but there was no drama, no bullshit. We were there to fight, you know what I mean? There wasn't shit going on.
Well, it couldn't have been a better coach for Corey to have, being the type of person he is.
Absolutely.
He really looks up to Frankie and emulates his, he's
work
a blueprint,
Yeah, 100%. And that's where Corey fit in so well with us, is that with those 5 values I just mentioned in Frankie, Corey carries the same ones, and you could add a little extra Jesus in there on the Corey side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So, so just that, watching that, and now watching Corey come in as raw as he was, and now how long are we in now? 8 years? How long is it?
Maybe 6.
All right. Yeah. So just to watch that evolution of that young kid there to the married dad I see today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what things haven't changed. Those 5 things that I mentioned about Frankie. Because that's what it takes to be great.
Yeah. And he's, like I said, lucky to be around all these guys. I have no shortage of content, of inspiration, and, great connections that everyone has here. It's legit. I've been other places. It's not the same.
I can't believe I've clumped up on you, Frankie Edgar. I'm telling a story about your son. That hurts me.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on. This is actually the first time I've done this, have a different perspective, and I'm going to do more because I love seeing that.
It was neat. And it's great that, for us guys that are on the outside, it's just great to talk about the people we love. You know what I mean? And what we're loving to do.
Awesome.
For me, it's just, great to talk about Frankie and then the Coreys and the experiences we have, and, having pizza at the Fighter House on Tough. like going there and watching Corey like be a team house leader in there when there was so much ego in that house, and him do it with like class and poise and not be like some of the other guys were, you know what I mean? Like, and then see him today, and then see who the lady he ends up with. I mean, it's just all great stuff, you know. So it's great that you can go out and document it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks again, Steve.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Steve Rivera for coming on the show. Like I said, he's one of my favorite episodes so far. He's super passionate, and I love his perspective on Frankie's first fight. And you can actually go back to Frankie's episode and listen to it if you haven't yet. It's fun listening to them back to back to get different points of view of the same story. And stay tuned for next week's guest. We'll be announcing on Tuesday. In the meantime, you can follow The First Fight on Instagram. That's our Instagram account to stay up to date on everything. And you can also check out our website, firstfightpodcast.com, to check all our previous episodes and get a little background on why we do what we do. And we will see you next week.